The evening began like any other, but something in the air felt different, as if the quiet streets of Seattle were holding a secret just for Emily, who stood near the window of her apartment watching the fading sunlight stretch across the buildings, her mind caught between routine and a strange sense of restlessness she could not explain, because life with Daniel had always been steady, safe, and filled with love, yet lately it felt like something soft and important had slipped away without either of them noticing, and she missed the little things, the laughter that used to come so easily, the long talks that lasted into the night, the way Daniel once looked at her as if she was the center of his world, and as she sighed and turned away from the glass, she heard the front door open and close gently, followed by Daniel's familiar footsteps, but even before she saw him, she felt that something about him had changed that day. There was a quiet excitement in the way he moved, a kind of nervous energy that made her curious, and when he finally stepped into the room, his eyes met hers with a softness that carried both love and hesitation, and instead of his usual greeting, he paused for a moment, as if choosing his words carefully, then reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a simple envelope, holding it out to her with a small smile that didn't quite hide his nerves, and Emily took it slowly, her fingers brushing against his as she did, feeling a spark of uncertainty run through her, because Daniel was not a man of surprises, he preferred comfort and predictability, and this small gesture already felt like something big, something meaningful, and as she opened the envelope, her heart began to beat faster, her eyes scanning the card inside, reading the elegant words that invited her to a private dinner that very night, just the two of them and three of Daniel's closest friends, and for a moment she didn't speak, her thoughts racing as she tried to understand why he would plan something like this, because it wasn't their anniversary, it wasn't a special date, and yet the way he stood there, watching her reaction so carefully, made it clear that this meant more than an ordinary gathering, and when she finally looked up at him, her voice was soft but filled with questions, asking what this was about, and Daniel stepped closer, his expression gentle, telling her that he just wanted her to feel something different, something they had not felt in a long time, and there was honesty in his words, but also something deeper, something he was not fully saying, and Emily could feel it, the quiet weight behind his request, the hidden meaning that made her both nervous and curious at the same time, because part of her wondered if this was his way of fixing what had been slowly fading between them, while another part feared that it might reveal something she was not ready to face, but as she stood there looking at him, she saw not doubt, not distance, but a man who was trying, in his own imperfect way, to reach her again, and that softened her hesitation, because despite everything, she still loved him deeply, and she missed the connection they once shared just as much as he did, and so after a long pause, she nodded quietly, agreeing to go, even though she did not fully understand what the night would bring, and Daniel's relief was immediate, his shoulders relaxing as he smiled, thanking her in a way that felt more emotional than the moment required, as if her simple yes meant more to him than she could see, and as he stepped away to get ready, Emily remained where she was, holding the invitation in her hand, reading it again, trying to make sense of the feelings rising inside her, because it wasn't just curiosity anymore, it was anticipation mixed with a hint of fear, the kind that comes before something life-changing, and as she prepared for the evening, choosing her dress carefully, looking at herself in the mirror a little longer than usual, she couldn't shake the thought that tonight was not just about dinner. It was about something deeper, something that might bring them closer or show them how far they had drifted, and as she finally stepped out of the apartment with Daniel beside her, walking into the cool autumn air, she glanced at him one more time, noticing the quiet hope in his eyes, and in that moment she realized that whatever was waiting for them tonight, it mattered more to him than he had ever been able to say, and that alone made her heart both heavy and hopeful as they moved forward into an evening that neither of them would ever forget. The restaurant stood quietly on a corner street, its soft golden lights glowing through tall glass windows as Emily and Daniel stepped inside, leaving behind the cool Seattle air, and from the very first moment, Emily felt the calm elegance of the place wrap around her like a gentle welcome, yet her heart still carried that same quiet tension, because even though everything looked normal, nothing about this evening truly felt ordinary, and as Daniel guided her toward a table set near the back, she noticed 3 men already seated there, each one rising politely as they approached, their expressions warm, respectful, and calm, not awkward or strange as she had feared, and Daniel introduced them with care, his voice steady but thoughtful, as if every detail mattered. First was Michael, a man with kind eyes and a calm presence that made him seem instantly trustworthy, then Ryan, who carried an easy smile and a natural charm that filled the space without effort, and finally Lucas, quieter than the others, his gaze thoughtful and observant, as if he noticed things others often missed, and Emily greeted them with a polite smile, still unsure of what to expect but slowly feeling her tension ease as they pulled out her chair and welcomed her with genuine kindness. And once they all sat down, the conversation began gently, starting with simple topics like work, travel, and favorite places in the city, and Emily found herself answering naturally, her voice steady, her thoughts slowly relaxing as the evening unfolded, because nothing felt forced, nothing felt uncomfortable, and Daniel, sitting beside her, seemed more at ease too, though she could still sense a quiet awareness in him, as if he was watching not just the conversation but her reactions as well. And as the food arrived, beautifully presented and warm, the group began to share stories, each man adding something unique to the table. Michael spoke about a time he had helped a stranger during a difficult moment, his words calm and sincere, showing a quiet strength that Emily found comforting. Ryan followed with a light-hearted story that made everyone laugh, his humor effortless and warm, bringing a brightness to the evening that Emily realized she had been missing in her life. And Lucas, though quieter, shared thoughtful insights about relationships and understanding people, his words simple but meaningful, making Emily pause and reflect in ways she hadn't expected, and as she listened to them, she began to notice something that slowly shifted her emotions from curiosity to something deeper, because each man seemed to carry a quality that felt familiar, not in a strange way, but in a comforting one, and as she glanced at Daniel, it began to make sense in a quiet, emotional way. Michael's calmness reminded her of how Daniel used to listen to her without rushing. Ryan's humor reflected the way Daniel once made her laugh without trying. And Lucas's thoughtful silence echoed the depth Daniel once showed in quiet moments, and this realization didn't make her uncomfortable, instead it touched something inside her, something she hadn't fully acknowledged before, and for a moment, her heart felt both full and heavy, because she wasn't just meeting these men, she was remembering pieces of her own relationship, pieces she had missed without fully realizing it. And as the evening continued, the conversation grew deeper, moving beyond surface-level talk into more personal reflections, yet always staying respectful and kind, never crossing into anything inappropriate, and Emily found herself opening up more than she expected, sharing her own thoughts about life, love, and the quiet changes that happen over time, and each man listened carefully, responding with understanding and warmth, making her feel heard in a way that felt both new and familiar at the same time. And Daniel remained present, adding to the conversation when needed, but often allowing the moment to flow naturally, his eyes occasionally meeting Emily's with a softness that carried both love and something unspoken. And as time passed, Emily realized that whatever she had feared before coming here had slowly faded, replaced by a sense of calm curiosity and emotional awareness, because this dinner was not about anything unusual or uncomfortable. It was about connection, about seeing and being seen, about understanding emotions that often go unspoken, and yet the question still remained quietly in her mind, growing stronger with each passing moment, because even though everything felt warm and genuine, she knew there was a reason behind it all, a deeper meaning that had not yet been revealed. And as she looked around the table, watching the soft light reflect on the faces of the people around her, she felt a mix of gratitude and anticipation, because this evening was becoming something she would not forget, not because of anything dramatic, but because of how it made her feel. And as she turned to Daniel once more, noticing the quiet hope still present in his eyes, she understood that whatever he had planned, it was not just about the dinner, it was about something far more important, something that was still waiting to be said. And as the night continued to unfold, Emily knew that she was only beginning to understand what this unforgettable evening was truly about. As the evening moved forward, the soft laughter at the table slowly faded into a quieter, more thoughtful mood, and Emily could feel the shift without anyone saying it out loud, as if the night itself was guiding them towards something deeper, something that had been waiting beneath the surface from the very beginning. And she noticed Daniel grow a little more serious, his smile still there but softer now, his eyes holding a kind of honesty that made her heart beat faster, because she knew this was the moment when everything would finally make sense. And after a brief pause, Daniel took a slow breath and began to speak, his voice calm but filled with emotion, not dramatic, not overwhelming, just real. And he admitted that over the years he had felt himself change in ways he never expected, not because he stopped loving Emily, but because life had quietly pulled him into routines, responsibilities, and small distractions that slowly took pieces of him away, pieces he didn't even realize he was losing until one day he looked at her and felt the distance, not in her, but in himself. And Emily listened closely, her eyes fixed on him, her heart tightening with every word, because she could feel the truth in what he was saying, and it wasn't painful in a harsh way, it was emotional in a gentle, honest way that made her understand rather than react. And Daniel continued, explaining that he had invited these three men not for any strange reason, but because each of them reminded him of qualities he once had, qualities he feared he had lost over time. And as he spoke, Emily slowly turned her gaze toward Michael, Ryan, and Lucas, seeing them differently now, not as guests at a dinner, but as reflections of something meaningful. And Michael gave a small nod, his calm voice adding that sometimes people don't lose who they are, they just forget how to show it. And Ryan followed with a light but sincere tone, saying that joy and laughter don't disappear, they just wait for the right moment to return. And Lucas, in his quiet way, simply said that understanding grows when people choose to listen again. And their words were not rehearsed, not forced, but natural and kind. And Emily felt something shift inside her, something warm and emotional, because this was not about comparison or replacement, it was about rediscovery, about reminding her and Daniel of the depth their relationship still held. And for a moment, she felt seen in a way that went beyond simple attention, she felt understood, valued, and remembered. And that feeling brought a soft sting to her eyes as she realized how much she had missed this kind of connection, not just from Daniel, but within their shared life. And as the conversation continued, Daniel looked at her again, his voice softer now, almost vulnerable, as he admitted that he had been afraid that he was no longer enough, afraid that the man she fell in love with had slowly faded. And instead of saying it directly, he had tried to show her through this evening, through these people, through these reflections of himself. And Emily's heart ached hearing this, not because of what he had done, but because of what he had been carrying alone. And she realized that his actions, though unusual, came from a place of deep love and quiet fear, not from distance or doubt in her. And the three men remained respectful throughout, never crossing any boundaries, never making the moment uncomfortable. Instead they offered gentle perspectives, sharing what they admired about Emily in a way that felt kind and sincere, not personal in a romantic sense, but appreciative of who she was as a person, her strength, her warmth, her ability to care deeply. And their words added to the emotional atmosphere without changing its meaning, because the focus remained on Emily and Daniel, on their connection, on their shared story. And as Emily sat there taking it all in, she felt a mix of emotions she couldn't fully name, gratitude, sadness, hope, and love all blending together. And she realized that this evening was not about a fantasy in the way she first thought, it was about understanding something real, something important that had been quietly slipping away. And as she turned back to Daniel, her eyes filled with emotion, she saw not a man who had changed for the worse, but a man who was trying to find his way back, trying to reconnect in the only way he knew how. And that realization softened everything inside her, because she understood now that love is not about always being perfect, It's about recognizing when something is missing and having the courage to face it, and as the moment settled around them, quiet and meaningful, Emily felt a question rise in her heart, not spoken but deeply felt, wondering if this was Daniel's way of letting go of who he used to be or if it was his way of trying to become that person again, and as she held that thought, looking at him with both tenderness and uncertainty, she knew that whatever came next would define not just this evening, but the future of their relationship, and in that quiet space between words, everything felt possible, yet nothing was certain, leaving her to wonder what the next moment would bring. The night air felt cool and fresh as Emily stepped outside the restaurant, the soft glow of the city lights reflecting on the quiet streets, and for a moment she just stood there, taking a deep breath as if she needed time to gather everything she was feeling, because the evening had been more than she expected, more emotional, more honest, and more real than anything they had shared in a long time. And beside her Daniel remained silent, his hands in his pockets, his posture slightly tense as if he was waiting for something, maybe her reaction, maybe her judgment, or maybe just a sign that everything was going to be okay. And Emily looked at him carefully, noticing how different he seemed now, not distant like before, but open in a way that made him almost vulnerable, and that alone made her heart soften, because she could see how much this had meant to him, how much effort he had put into creating a moment that could bring them closer, even if he wasn't sure how it would be received. And after a few quiet seconds, she stepped closer to him, closing the small distance between them, and when she spoke, her voice was calm but filled with emotion, telling him that she finally understood what he had been trying to do, that this evening wasn't about anything unusual or uncomfortable, it was about connection, about remembering the parts of their relationship that had slowly faded under the weight of everyday life. And Daniel looked at her with a mix of hope and fear, as if her next words would decide everything, and she gently reached for his hand, holding it firmly, not hesitating this time, and told him something simple but powerful, that she didn't need different versions of him, she didn't need him to compare himself to anyone else, she only needed him to be present, to be real, to be the person who once made her feel seen and loved in the smallest moments. And as those words settled between them, Daniel's expression changed, the tension leaving his face as his eyes softened, and for the first time that night, he truly relaxed, because he realized that he hadn't lost himself, he had just forgotten how to show up in the way that mattered most, and Emily could see that realization in him, could feel the shift in his energy, and it made her smile softly, because this was the man she knew, the man she had fallen in love with, still there beneath the layers of time and routine. And as they began to walk slowly down the quiet street, their steps naturally falling into rhythm, there was a sense of peace between them that hadn't been there in a long time, not forced or dramatic, just simple and real. And they talked quietly, not about big plans or heavy topics, but about small things, about how they could spend more time together, how they could bring back the little habits they once shared, the late-night talks, the laughter over simple things, the moments of silence that felt comfortable instead of distant, and with each step, it felt like they were not just moving forward physically, but emotionally as well, leaving behind the unspoken tension that had built up over time, and embracing something new, something stronger. And as they reached a quiet corner where the streetlights cast a soft glow around them, Daniel paused and turned to her, his voice steady now, filled with quiet determination, promising not perfection, not grand gestures, but effort, honesty, and presence. And Emily listened, her heart calm and full, because that was all she had ever wanted, not a perfect relationship, but a real one, built on understanding and care. And she nodded gently, letting him know that she believed in him, that she believed in them, and in that moment, nothing else mattered, not the past, not the doubts, just the simple truth that they were still choosing each other. And as they continued walking, their hands still joined, Emily glanced back once toward the restaurant, a small smile forming on her lips as she realized that the evening had not been about three men or any kind of fantasy, it had been about rediscovery. About seeing love from different angles and understanding its true meaning. and as she turned her gaze forward again, she felt a quiet excitement for what lay ahead, because for the first time in a long while, the future didn't feel uncertain, it felt open, full of possibility, and as Daniel gently squeezed her hand, she knew that this night, this unforgettable evening, would stay with her forever, not because of what had happened, but because of what it had changed. And just before they disappeared into the quiet city streets, Daniel looked at her one more time with a soft smile, a new kind of light in his eyes, as if this was not an ending at all, but the beginning of a deeper, stronger chapter in their story.